The funding for this program is provided by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and the Friends of 4, 10, and 12.
It looks beautiful from the outside, but when you peel off the mask and talk to the victims, you uncover another part of the story. The documented evidence you are about to see may seem unbelievable, but it's all true.
When they took my family, there wasn't anything else to live for. I tried to kill myself. Thank God I didn't succeed.
The so-called victims talked about in this film, The Godmakers, are Mormons. And the film itself is part of a small but vocal anti-Mormon campaign currently making headlines and controversy in Idaho. Good evening. It's estimated that about a quarter of the citizens of Idaho, about 250,000 people, are members of the Mormon Church. That makes the Mormons the largest religious group by far in the state. Those thousands of Idahoans, neighbors of yours and mine, and their church have come under increasing attack in the last few months. The attack is centering on a controversial anti-Mormon film that is being shown in nearly every corner of the state. The film attempts to make the case that Mormonism is really anti-Christian. The film is generating broad discussion and in some cases some pretty harsh talk. One Mormon leader has been quoted as saying the film is a sort of religious pornography. Officially, the church has called the film a distortion that makes totally false assertions. The group that's been pushing the film, a group called Saints Alive, made up mostly of former Mormons, calls the LDS Church, and I quote, "one of the most deceptive and dangerous groups in the world," end quote. And the charges go even deeper than that. In Canyon and Owyhee counties, where the film has been shown several times, there are charges of violence associated with its showing. And some local residents say the controversy has reopened old religious wounds. For one thing, the film is being shown, reportedly to often big crowds, in mostly fundamentalist and evangelical churches. Whatever it is, the film The Godmakers is causing quite a debate. Tonight we take up that debate using 4 excerpts from the film, and then later on in separate interviews we'll talk with spokesmen for the group Saints Alive and the Mormon Church. The underlying theme of the film The Godmakers is that Mormonism is anti-Christian because, as the film says, Mormon doctrine teaches that Mormon men can become godlike. This first excerpt begins with author Floyd McAlvin, author of a book called The Mormon Illusion.
They believe that God eternally progressed, that once he was a man and then he became God. From that comes their doctrine that all can progress to be gods. For instance, in Articles of Faith, they have this by Talmage, that as man is, God once was. As God is, man may become. So their whole doctrine flows from this, about becoming God.
Tell me who God the Father is to you.
He is like you and I, every human being on the face of the earth.
So is he a man?
Yes, he is.
How did he get to be God?
I don't know. Yeah, he's perfect in every way.
So if we are perfect, can we become like God?
Yes, ma'am.
My son realized after about 5 or 6 months that he had made a mistake in joining the Mormon Church, and one of the main things that made him realize that was the ridiculousness of the idea that the Mormons teach that you can become a god.
The biggest danger was that they took me in, and I was thinking it was a Christian church. And it wasn't a Christian church. It was a cult.
The film attempts to make the case that Mormonism is a cult that is actually close to Satanism. That's a charge that's drawn predictably some of the sharpest response from Mormon leaders. The filmmakers call this next scene, quote, the first ever reenactment of secret temple rites, in this case, a ceremony for the dead.
In the Mormon temple marriage, the partners are sealed to each other for time and all eternity in Mason-like rituals. And without this ceremony, no one can enter the presence of Joseph Smith and become a god.
Pay, lay, ale.
Brother Pratt, having authority, I wash you preparatory to receiving your anointings for and in behalf of John Kimball, who is dead, that you may become clean from the blood and sins of this generation.
Sister Bradford, I wash you preparatory to you receiving your anointings for and behalf of
Eliza Barrett.
Eliza Barrett, who is dead, that you may become clean from the blood and sins of this generation.
I wash your head, that your brain and intellect may become clear and active.
Your eyes, that you may see clearly and discern between truth and error.
Thousands of occultic ceremonies each day are performed for the dead, so that they too can receive the benefits of Mormonism. Mormons are encouraged to have encounters with the dead, and it's not uncommon for demons impersonating the dead to appear to Mormons stating that they've been converted to the Mormon Church in the spirit world and now want their family history traced.
Your loins, that you may be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth, that you may have joy in your posterity.
Your vitals and bowels, that they may be strong and healthy and perform their proper function.
Your breast, that it may be the receptacle of pure and virtuous principles.
Here in Anton LaVey's Satanic Bible, under the section called Infernal Names, I want to show you something. Here we have the god Mormo, who is king of the ghouls, god of the living dead. And those people that follow him are called Mormons.
The film also attacks the Mormon lifestyle, accusing that lifestyle of fostering social problems like divorce and suicide. This segment features testimony from former Mormons alleging pressure from their church leaders to divorce spouses.
Greg and Jolene, divorced because of the Mormon Church, and have now remarried.
He was raised Christian, and I was raised Mormon. We just had a very beautiful relationship, but it always came back to the Mormonism. I had to convert him in some way. And after 2.5 years of really trying hard, I just couldn't do it, and I was advised to divorce him.
Well, it became obvious to the church leaders that my husband was not going to go along with the church standards of the word of wisdom and had no desire to be active in the priesthood. And so they thought that it was perfectly fine and accessible and encouraged me to divorce my husband.
The second visit to the counselor, he went over the things that we had told him, and he said, well, there are just some people that shouldn't be married.
I couldn't imagine a bishop actively counseling for divorce. His job is to seek for ways in which the marriage partners can be reconciled.
By the way, the last person appearing in that segment is one of the 2 Mormon spokesmen featured in the film. The film also says Mormon church pressure for members to be perfect leads to a deterioration of what the film refers to as self-worth, and in some cases leads to something much worse, in this case suicide. This segment deals with the suicide of a Boise area high school student in 1982.
Gene and Perry Eliason, father and brother of young Kip, who committed suicide early in 1982 at the age of 16.
Kip was almost a perfect son. He was a 4-point student, Capital High School. He was involved with the track team where he got the most inspirational track team member. Kip was my best friend and partner since his mother passed away when he was 5 years old. The last 2 years, Kip was so busy with his other activities with the church that most of our outside activities came to a halt. The more deeply Kip got involved with the church, the more depressed he became. So I sat down with Kip and would discuss this problem with him and to find out what was bothering him. At that point, he told me that he had fittings, sexual fittings that were in direct conflict with the teachings of the church. When Kip went to the LDS counselors, they only reinforced the teachings of the church, which just increased Kip's feelings of unworthiness.
I know what Kip was going through. I went to the same type interviews that he did. The pressure was great to strive for worthiness, to be perfect all the time. The only problem is Kip took it a little too seriously.
This is all I have left for my son Kip. It was the last letter he left me. Dad, I love you more than words can say. If it were possible, I would stay alive for only you. For I really only love you, but it's not possible. I must first love myself, and I do not. A strange feeling of darkness and self-hate overpowers all my defenses. I must unfortunately yield to it. This turbulent feeling is only for a few to truly understand. I feel that you do not comprehend the immense feeling of self-hatred I have. This is the only way I feel that I can relieve myself of these feelings now. Carry on with your life and be happy. I love you more than words can say.
Again, those are excerpts from a film called The God Makers, an anti-Mormon film that's been making the rounds in Idaho and throughout the Pacific Northwest. Now an interview we videotaped earlier today with a spokesman for the group called Saints Alive. That's the group that's distributed the film, The God Makers. Jeff Pate is from Salt Lake City, Utah. He is a spokesman for the group Saints Alive. Mr. Pate, let me ask you about that last scene we just saw in that last excerpt with a father breaking down talking about the suicide of his son. Pretty harsh stuff.
Yes, it is.
Why?
Well, I think there's a point to make. We want people to see maybe a side of Mormonism that they're not normally exposed to.
And what side are you trying to make them see?
Well, in that particular scene is that everything is not always as good as it may look from the outside. There are problems that have to be dealt with. That particular problem having to do with church counselors, exerting a lot of pressure and influence upon a young man whose life was obviously ended. Now, we're not saying that's the normal situation, but it does happen.
The implication, though, seems to be in the film that that is a typical situation. Not typical in that it ends in suicide, but that youngsters are placed in enormously difficult, pressure-filled situations.
Well, there's a lot of pressure placed on the young people to achieve and excel, I think, more than a normal amount is. And if you view the statistics of the state of Utah, they lead the nation in teenage suicide.
Why is your group pushing this film so hard?
Well, the group itself is a missionary outreach, and the film is an endeavor of the group to basically do missionary work to inform the Christian churches of the beliefs of Mormonism, basically the beliefs that aren't usually exposed by missionaries per se.
As you know, the church has said that the film is full of half-truths and distortions and really misrepresents Mormon doctrine.
Well, as we've often said to them, would they please point it out? They use innuendo that they accuse us of and say it is full of distortions and mistruths and things which cannot be documented, but we've asked them to point it out. I think if they really felt that were the case, they could receive an injunction to have the film stopped, if they really felt that it was full of untruths about the church.
Are you implying in some way that Mormons are bad people or that their doctrine is just bad?
Not at all. The Mormons are not on trial here. My family are some of the most beautiful people I know. Their lives are tremendously dedicated to this organization, and I love them with all my heart. And that's the obvious reason why we're doing this. We hope is the obvious reason, because we want people to see that the doctrines, Mormonism is the thing that's bad. The people are tremendously beautiful.
But still, you're accused of being a hate group, a group that's, going around tearing down another religion, if you will.
Well, if we could look at something, Paul was accused as hating the Jews, and they were his people. He loved them. We love the Mormon people. Why would we spend time and effort in doing what we're doing if it wasn't out of love?
Well, some would suggest, I guess, that maybe a better way of doing this would be to try to convert them to your way of seeing things as opposed to attacking the doctrine. In other words, do it through a positive, if you know what I mean. Be positive about it instead of being negative.
Well, we feel we're bearing a positive message, but the problem we're dealing with here, such as producing the film, is getting a Mormon to talk to us and listen to us. They're told not to view the film. My family is told not to discuss anything, any of my points of belief with me as a Christian. This is out of directive from the church. They're not to discuss these points with me. How can you discuss these things unless you catch their attention in some way? The film obviously is hard-hitting, and that's one of its designs.
Let me quote you something that was written in the Lewiston Morning Tribune, a newspaper in the northern part of this state, after the film was shown in that area. The editorial said that certainly it's a free country and you're entitled to put whatever kind of film out on the marketplace you want, but that this film was hardly an object lesson in tolerance or brotherly love, two things right at the heart of Christian belief. Isn't there some truth to that?
Truth that the film is not done in tolerance or brotherly love, I wouldn't say that at all. Again, all we have to draw from as fundamental evangelical Christians are the scriptures we know as the New Testament, and the zeal that you go forth to portray the love of God is one of the things to judge love by, how much you care about what you're doing for other people. And they may not like the ways it's presented. A lot of times the messages, the Sermon on the Mount wasn't received well by a lot of the audience, but yet some received it and had their lives changed from it. And that is the only thing we can go by. That is what we try to follow as our guide in what we're doing.
Why isn't it enough, in sort of the philosophical area here, why isn't it enough to just believe what you believe and let people who seek to believe something else believe what they want to believe?
Because the belief that we embrace as fundamental evangelical Christianity is that these other people are lost without the saving grace of Jesus Christ. And that is why we just can't let them alone, out of obvious love for them and trying to do it. It would obviously ease my family situation if I would just be quiet about it. But when I feel that we have one of the greatest things to offer, how can we be quiet about what we've got?
So Mormons would be lost in what way?
In that they're not embracing the biblical God, the biblical concept of God. Their whole belief system is based on a God who was once a man. He was created by another finite individual and progressed in his life to become a God himself, which is totally alien to the Scriptures as we in Judeo-Christianity accept them.
As this film is being shown in Idaho, as I mentioned earlier, it's apparently drawing fairly large crowds at fundamental evangelical churches. Why?
I think here in this state, which parts of it are predominantly Mormon, there's a curiosity at one point, and there are people in the fringes, maybe on the outer edges, that may be quote-unquote anti-Mormon. They may have a bone to pick with the Mormon himself, but I think the large majority of the groups are sincere, wanting to understand their Mormon neighbors, wanting to understand their beliefs, which they very rarely hear talked about, wanting to see what the temple is all about so they can better communicate with their Mormon neighbors.
Is not potentially, at least, though, one of the results of this film being seen so widely and being debated as it is, that you're going to set one religion off against another?
Well, I suppose people could look at it and say that may be the end results, but that's not at all what we have in mind, and I really don't foresee that at all either, at least not by anyone in our group whatsoever. As to work and to dedicate yourself in serving in this capacity in Saints Alive, you have to have all bitterness stripped away from your heart, and we will not let anyone represent or in any way take lead in a meeting if they have hatred or bitterness in their heart. And that is the main thing we emphasize. How can you reach someone if you don't go?
That?
Well, through just basically the organization itself gets together and discusses these things among themselves, and if someone feels a certain antagonism or a certain feeling towards the church, we suggest a cooling off period, that after they have understood the things that they were involved in were basically not true and have accepted biblical Christianity, we suggest, as the Apostle Paul did, just to sit and wait for maybe a year or two to study and dedicate yourself to just following Jesus Christ and then going back and ministering to the Mormon people.
So I guess I'm hearing you say that you're not really terribly concerned about the fallout that surrounds this film.
Well, the fallout we're hoping for and that we're looking for and that we're seeing, such as last year, 10,000 Mormon people leaving the church to accept biblical Christianity, that's the fallout we're looking for. And we feel if God is behind us and blessed as we have been assured He is, then these other things are just maybe fears that other people would bring up.
Well, Mr. Pate, thank you very much.
You're sure welcome.
Another view now from an Idaho spokesman for the Mormon Church. Ted Johnson from Boise is the public communications officer in southwestern Idaho for the church. Mr. Johnson, what do you think of that?
Well, certainly it's an alarming thing to see things that you believe in attacked in such a way as the Godmaker film does.
I mentioned the church's official position earlier, official statements that it's full of distortions, that it's full of half-truths. Can you give me just one example of where they've misrepresented the Mormon doctrine?
Well, I think anybody that's lived in Idaho or in any other community where the Mormon people live would know that the family orientation, the strong family ties, are one of the hallmarks of our religion. And certainly the film in this segment and in other segments tends to distort that.
What about the charge that Mormonism is anti-Christian?
Certainly we are appalled and surprised by that kind of charge. The name of the church is the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I don't know how we can be more specific in terms of where we orient. Christ is the very heart of the church. And certainly while we may have differences of opinion with some other religious groups on Christ and His role in our lives, He is certainly the center of our lives.
What sort of effect do you think this has had? I've mentioned that it's been shown in this area of the state. I understand it's been shown a good deal in the Magic Valley. It's been certainly shown in the Moscow, Lewiston area, up in the Sandpoint area. What sort of effect is it having?
Well, I can't assess that very well from this point of view, but in instances there's bound to be, and there have been, some divisions in communities that are a result of this, polarizing of opening religious wounds, if you will.
Well, you heard Mr. Pate just a moment ago discount that possibility, but you're saying it really is happening.
Well, I think those in the communities involved are fully aware that that can be the result of this sort of thing, and it's unfortunate.
Is that the ultimate concern here? I mean, except for a moment that they're misrepresenting what you believe and what Mormons believe, is that really the danger here, that you're setting one segment of our population against another?
Well, I don't see how we can discount that. It's certainly a very real part of living together in a community, in a country with a plurality of religions and religious tolerance. It isn't the appropriate thing to attack another person's religious beliefs and make light of them. And we feel that this group is going about doing that.
Is there some message in this for us in a larger sense in terms of what sort of religious tolerance exists in this state?
Well, I think it's not representative of what truly is here. A better example would be the Thanksgiving service, the interfaith Thanksgiving service that's being held here in Boise in the Catholic Cathedral next Wednesday evening before Thanksgiving, in which all religious denominations have been invited to participate and will be participating. I think that's a better example.
Yeah, but this, I characterized it earlier as a small but vocal. Is it small?
It appears to be, yes.
How is this impacting, Mr. Johnson, on your membership? I mean, are you having people call you and say, gee, what's going on here?
Well, we're dismayed at the fact that it's happening, because it is a disturbing, emotionally disturbing to the members of the church to see this sort of attack going on. That's the only result I see from it.
You don't see any danger that Mormons are going to be leaving the church in droves as a result of something like this?
Let me say that anyone who's fully aware of the teachings of the church would not be deceived by this information in the film.
What about one of the charges that Mr. Pate made, one of the comments he made about people are curious about the Mormon church, people who are not members of the church are curious, perhaps a legitimate curiosity about your beliefs, and that it's difficult for them to find out information about the church. Is that a fair statement?
Well, it's interesting. We send out about 30,000 missionaries every year throughout the world to teach people the truth about the beliefs that we have. We do a lot in attempting to help people understand our basic tenets. And so there certainly is no
ample opportunity for people to
full opportunity for them to do so, yes.
There's been some controversy in some locations. Most recently, I read just yesterday in Washington State about showing this film in a public school. You have some concerns about that?
We do have some concerns about that. The nature and the place of it being shown to attack another group in the community certainly is open to some evaluation, I think.
I guess anyone who understands the history of your church or even the history of this state knows that people who belong to the Mormon church have long been subject to intolerance or persecution of one sort or another. Is this just the latest chapter in that?
It is the latest chapter. I hope it is not the kind of thing that went on sometime in history. I don't think it is, but certainly one of the reasons for our being willing to appear and make a statement this evening has to do with the fact that there are some people who legitimately wonder what our beliefs are as to this film.
Well, maybe we should say that you weren't all that anxious to appear here.
That's correct. I think it's a fair statement that we are have no desire to debate.
Does this in some way, Mr. Johnson, signal a basic split between these fundamental churches which apparently have taken the lead in distributing this film and your church?
Well, I don't know how to answer that precisely. It seems interesting that the Saints Alive group and others who are affiliated with them choose to teach a negative missionary message against what someone else believes, not what they believe. And that seems singular. Our message is always to teach what we believe and how we understand the teachings of Christ. And that continues to be our message, and we don't want to get involved in the other side.
What do you see as their motivation then? Is it to recruit?
Well, I think perhaps their spokesman can say best what they're seeking to accomplish. I don't understand exactly why they would do such a thing.
Okay, I want to give you an opportunity here in the short time that remains. You have a statement that I think represents an official position of the church, and I'll give you an opportunity in a couple of minutes here to deal with that if you'd like.
Thank you. It's with deep concern and sadness that we witness the religious prejudice and misunderstanding fostered by the Godmaker film. The film and the related materials have been prepared by those who are avowed enemies of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. They distort and ridicule that which is most sacred to us. They misrepresent and mock that which we believe has come by revelation from the Almighty. The film is not an accurate portrayal of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, its doctrines, or its members. It's a slick, heavy-handed, emotionally charged deception. Its purpose seems to be to arouse fear, suspicion, and ridicule, and to divide neighborhoods and communities. It carefully ignores the many positive contributions made by the teachings of the Church in the lives of our members in every community in which we live. This film is both sick and slick. It tells far more about the filmmakers than about the Church itself. We believe this film to be a religious travesty and call upon all religious leaders and fair-minded people everywhere to raise their voices against this sacrilege. We ask public officials to review the propriety of allowing the use of tax-supported facilities for the exhibition of the film. We call upon television stations, in discharging their public trust, to review their policies relating to the showing of such obvious distortions of the religious beliefs of anyone. We suggest that all newspapers examine their policies relating to the advertising of the film to ensure that paid notices are fair and in good taste, free of deceitful misrepresentations of the religious beliefs of others. It is strange, indeed, that a film which mocks by distortion and misrepresentation the religious beliefs of a church founded upon the teachings of Jesus Christ should be prepared, promoted, and purveyed by those who claim they are Christians. Will the sacred elements of Protestantism, Catholicism, Islam, Judaism, Buddhism, Masonry, and any other body of believers, large or small, be maligned and outraged next? In a country which prides itself on religious freedom and religious plurality, fairness and mutual regard should not let that happen. Simple courtesy would dictate a decent respect for that which is sacred to others. Thank you.
Well, we appreciate you being here tonight, sir.
Thank you.
We'll be back tomorrow. I'm Mark Johnson. Good night.
The funding for this program is provided by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and the Friends of 4, 10, and 12.
Thousands of occultic ceremonies each day are performed for the dead, so that they too can receive the benefits of Mormonism.
This film, The Godmakers, has set off a major religious controversy in Idaho. Tonight at 11:30 on Idaho Reports, we'll talk with a Mormon leader about this new wave of anti-Mormonism.